She told the mafia boss, "Nobody marries a poor girl," he said. "Let's prove them all wrong." The air in the Victory Diner was a permanent soup of burnt coffee and old grease. For Savannah Ruiz, it was the smell of survival. At 24, she felt closer to 40. Every joint in her body ached, a dull thrum against the backdrop of clattering plates and the high-pitched whine of the ancient milkshake machine. She worked doubles, 6 days a week, trading her youth for a stained apron and tips that rarely covered the bus fare home. It was all for him, her father sitting in the worn-out armchair in their fourth-floor walk-up, the hiss of his oxygen tank the apartment's only soundtrack. The medical bills were a mountain, a sheer, unscalable cliff of debt that had swallowed their savings, their dignity, and was now coming for their home. Each $5 tip, each quarter pocketed, was a single grain of sand thrown against an avalanche. Her world was small, defined by the 6 blocks from her apartment to the diner, the fluorescent hell of the pharmacy, and the gray walls of her father's room. Her future was even smaller. It was a pinprick of light, and it was closing. This shift was no different. It was late, past midnight on a Tuesday. The rain outside turned the Brooklyn streets into slick, dark mirrors. The diner was empty, save for 2 truckers nursing cold coffee in a corner booth, and a quiet man in the back, face hidden by the brim of a ball cap, who hadn't said a word since ordering a water 2 hours ago. The bell above the door jingled, a cheerful sound that made Savannah's stomach drop. 2 men entered, not with the shuffle of late-night customers, but with a sudden, violent energy that sucked the warmth from the room. They wore black hoodies pulled tight and ski masks that reeked of cheap synthetic wool. One was tall and broad, the other was wiry, nervous, his hand twitching in his pocket. "Nobody move!" the wiry one shouted, his voice cracking. He pulled a small, silver revolver. The truckers froze, hands raised. "You!" the tall one barked at Savannah, vaulting over the counter. "The register. Now." Savannah's breath hitched. Her hands flew up. All she could think about was the $300 in that drawer, money for her father's medication. She thought about the ache in her feet, the endless, grinding exhaustion, and a sudden cold rage eclipsed her fear. The tall one grabbed her by the front of her apron, shoving her toward the register. "Hurry up!" She fumbled with the key, her hands shaking. "It's stuck," she whispered. "Open it!" he roared, raising a hand. "Hey," a voice grumbled from the back. "Leave the girl alone." It was the quiet man in the hat. He was standing now. The wiry man with the gun swung toward him. "Shut up! Sit down!" "You get your money," the quiet man said, his voice a low gravel. "You don't need to hurt her." The tall man grunted. "Big mistake, old man." He let go of Savannah to turn on the new threat. The wiry one leveled his gun at the quiet man's chest. It was the opening. In that split second, Savannah didn't think she reacted. Her hand shot down, not to the register keys, but to the underside of the counter, where a small 6-inch boot knife was taped, a gift from her father, from a different lifetime. "Brooklyn is rough," he'd said, "just in case." Her fingers closed around the rubber hilt. She slammed her full weight on the no-sale button, the drawer flying open and cracking the tall robber square in the jaw. He howled, staggering back. As the wiry one turned, surprised by the sound, Savannah was already moving. She brought the knife up, not to kill, but to wound, slashing it across the arm holding the gun. He screamed, a high-pitched shriek. The gun clattered to the floor. In the same instant, the quiet man from the back booth moved. He wasn't just a quiet patron. He moved with a brutal, practiced efficiency. He kicked the gun away, then grabbed the wiry man's broken arm, twisted, and a sharp, wet snap echoed in the diner. The tall robber, clutching his bleeding face, saw his partner on the ground. He looked at the quiet man, who was now picking up the revolver. He looked at Savannah, standing wild-eyed, her apron stained, the bloody knife still gripped in her white-knuckled hand. He scrambled, grabbed his partner, and they fled into the rain, the bell jingling mockingly behind them. Silence descended, heavy, thick, the smell of copper and fear. Savannah was shaking so hard she thought her knees would buckle. She dropped the knife. It clanged against the linoleum. The quiet man looked at her. He was older than she'd thought, his face a map of old scars. He calmly ejected the bullets from the revolver, pocketing them, before placing the empty gun on the counter. He walked over, his eyes taking in the blood on her sleeve, the fierce, terrified set of her jaw. He pulled a thick wad of cash from his jeans, peeled off several $100 bills, and threw them on the counter. "For the trouble," he said, and he didn't wait for a reply. He was out the door before she could even find her breath. She stared at the money, then at the blood on the floor. She didn't call the police. In this part of Brooklyn, you didn't call the police unless you wanted more trouble. You cleaned up the mess, you locked the door, and you kept your mouth shut. The next day, she showed up for her shift at noon. Her body was a symphony of bruises. Her boss, a sweaty man named Sal, had just grunted when she told him about the attempted robbery and the broken register. He hadn't asked if she was okay. The diner was dead. She was wiping down the counter, the smell of bleach stinging her nose, when the bell jingled. A man sat at the counter. He did not belong. He was in his mid-30s, with dark, watchful eyes. His suit was a deep, charcoal gray, tailored so perfectly it probably cost more than her father's last 3 hospital stays combined. A black wool overcoat was folded neatly on the stool beside him. His black hair was cut short, precise. He looked like a painting of a hawk, all sharp angles and quiet, predatory stillness. "Coffee," he said. His voice was deep, with a rough edge. "Black." Savannah nodded, her hands unsteady as she grabbed a mug. Her right hand was wrapped in a cheap bandage where she'd cut it on the register drawer. She poured the coffee and set it in front of him. His eyes flicked down to the bandage, then back up to her face. He didn't look at her with pity or curiosity. He looked at her like he was reading a file. He said nothing. He just sipped his coffee and watched. Savannah tried to busy herself. She restocked the napkins. She polished the pie case. She refilled the salt shakers, but she could feel his gaze on her. It was heavy. It wasn't a leer, it was an assessment. He watched her move. He watched her wince when she put too much weight on her bruised leg. He watched her interact with the 2 other customers who trickled in. It was the most unnerving hour of her life. When he was finished, he stood. He placed a $50 bill on the counter. "Sir, this is too much," she said, her voice small. "It's only $2. He was already at the door, pulling on his coat. "It's not a mistake, he said, without turning, and he was gone. Savannah stared at the money, a cold dread settling in her gut. She didn't have to wait long. An hour later, the man from the robbery, the quiet patron, walked in. He looked different in the daylight, cleaner. He sat in the same booth. "The boss wants to thank you," he said. His voice was gravel. "I don't need thanks," Savannah said, wiping her hands on her apron. "My name is Sal. You saved my life," he said flatly, as if stating the weather. "The boss, Mr. Moretti, he doesn't like loose ends. He wants to reward you. He heard about your father. He's offering to clear his medical tabs. All of it." The air left Savannah's lungs. All of it. The mountain, just gone. It was a lifeline so sudden, so complete, it made her dizzy. And then she heard the name, Moretti. Dario Moretti. It wasn't a name you heard on the news. It was a name you heard in whispers, in alleys, in stories mothers told their sons to scare them straight, a name tied to shipping, to imports, and to a dozen other things that disappeared in the night. The lifeline suddenly felt like a noose. "No," she said. Her voice was sharp, shocking even herself. Sal's eyebrows shot up. "Kid, you don't understand what he's offering." "I understand perfectly," she said, her hands balling into fists. "You take money from a man like that, you're not rewarded, you're owned. I don't want his money. I don't want his help." She leaned closer. You tell him thanks, but no thanks, and I don't owe him, and he doesn't owe me. We're even. She turned her back to him, her heart hammering, and began scrubbing the coffee machine with a vengeance. Sal was quiet for a long time. She heard him sigh. He's not gonna like that, he said. He left a 20 on the table for the coffee. He didn't come back, but the man in the suit did. The next day, noon. The same stool, coffee, black. And the watching? It was a new kind of torture. He said nothing. He just sat for 1 hour and watched her. The other regulars, what few there were, learned to avoid the counter. The air around him was cold, still. Savannah's hands trembled every time she refilled his cup. She tried to hate him. She did hate him. She hated the way he looked at her, like she was a puzzle he was slowly solving. She hated the power that rolled off him in silent waves. She hated the $50 bill he left every single day. And in a dark, secret part of her, she hated that his presence, more than anything else in her life, made her feel seen. It had been a week of the silent man at the counter, a week of her nerves being stretched piano wire tight. She finished her shift. It was 1 a.m. The streetlights cast weak, yellow pools on the wet pavement. Her walk home was 6 blocks. 6 blocks she could do in her sleep. Tonight, they felt different. She heard it on the 2nd block, the low, deep hum of a powerful engine, idling. A black SUV, an Escalade, new, with windows so dark they looked like polished obsidian. It was crawling along the curb, keeping perfect pace with her. Her heart leaped into her throat. This was it, the price for saying no, the price for her pride. She walked faster, her worn-out sneakers slipping on the damp concrete. The SUV sped up. She ducked into a side street, a narrow alley that smelled of garbage and rain, a shortcut. The SUV's high, bright headlights swung around the corner, pinning her against a brick wall, a dead end. She was trapped. She fumbled in her pocket for her keys, her only weapon, but her hands were shaking too hard to get a grip. The SUV stopped, its engine a low, threatening growl. The driver's door opened. A single polished black dress shoe hit the pavement. Dario Moretti stepped out. He wasn't in his suit. He was dressed in dark pants and a black cashmere sweater that made him look less like a businessman and more like a shadow. He stood by the open door, 20 feet away, his face half hidden in the darkness. You shouldn't walk alone this late, he said. It was the first full sentence she'd ever heard him speak. His voice was calm, a low rumble that vibrated in the compressed space of the alley. You're following me, she accused, her voice a breathless mix of terror and rage. I'm making sure you get home, and he replied. To what? Kidnap me? Threaten me? Because I didn't take your blood money? He didn't flinch at her anger. He just watched her, his head tilted slightly. No one follows you but me, he said, his voice flat, a statement of fact, not a threat. You're under my protection now. Protection? She laughed, but the sound came out as a broken sob. I don't need your protection. I was fine before you and your men came into my life. You were not fine, and he said, taking a step closer. She flinched, and he stopped. You were scraping by. You were a target. And what am I now? Yours. The word tasted like acid. You are brave, he said, as if the word was foreign to him. You saved Sal's life. You stood up to me. That makes you a problem, and it makes you an asset. My enemies see you save my man. They see me at your counter. They think you're my girl. They will come for you to get to me. So this is your fault, she yelled, slamming her hand against the brick wall. This is my world, he corrected her, his voice never rising. And now you're in it. I am trying to keep you alive. His quiet intensity was a suffocating force. She was a storm, and he was the mountain, unmoving. I don't want to be in your world, Mr. Moretti. It's too late for that, he nodded to the SUV. Get in. I'll drive you to your door. I'll walk. No, he said, not you won't. Just no. It was an absolute... She stared at him, her chest heaving. He stared back, patient. He would wait all night. He would stand there until she froze or starved. She was trembling, from cold, from rage, and from that other terrifying thing, that dark, unsettling pull. His certainty, his power, it was solid. With a cry of frustration, she stormed past him, yanking open the heavy passenger door, and threw herself into the ridiculously plush leather seat. The ride was 4 blocks. It was the loudest silence she had ever experienced when they reached her building. He put the car in park. "Stay away from me," she said, her hand on the door handle. "I can't," he said, looking straight ahead through the windshield. "Not anymore." She scrambled out, slammed the door, and ran into her building, her keys jangling. She didn't look back. She knew he was still there, watching. He stayed away, but his presence didn't. 2 days later, she came home from a double, her feet screaming. There were 2 large paper bags outside her apartment door. Not cheap bags, bags from a gourmet market downtown. She looked inside. Fresh bread, the kind with the hard, crackly crust, real pasta, a bottle of dark green olive oil, a whole plump chicken, fresh vegetables, things she hadn't been able to afford in a year. In the second bag was a pharmacy bag. She opened it. Her father's prescriptions, all of them. Even the new, experimental one that cost $800 a month. The one she'd been fighting with the insurance company about for weeks. At the bottom of the bag, a plain white envelope, inside, a thick stack of cash. She didn't count it. She didn't need to. It felt like rent. There was no note. She was furious. This was his protection. This was him buying her, piece by piece. She was just another bill for him to pay. She spent an hour stewing, pacing the tiny apartment. The next morning, she took a cab to a part of town she never visited. She found the Moretti Imports building. It was a glass and steel fortress. She couldn't get past the lobby. A man in a suit, built like a refrigerator, stopped her. "I have a delivery for Mr. Moretti," she said, her voice shaking. She shoved the bags and the envelope into the man's arms. "Tell him Savannah Ruiz doesn't accept charity. Tell him to leave me alone." She left before he could reply. It was a war of attrition. The next week, the bags were there again. This time, just the medicine and an envelope marked rent. She returned it again. This time, she left it at the diner. Sal came in at 4, like clockwork. She slid the package across the counter. "Give this back to your boss," she said. His face was hard. "He's just trying to help, kid." "He's trying to own," she shot back. This went on for 3 weeks. The gifts appeared. She returned them. Her father was getting worse. The bills were piling higher. She was so tired. It happened on a Tuesday, her day off. She was in the kitchen, trying to stretch a can of tomato soup and half a box of old pasta into a meal for 2. She heard it, a thud and a sharp, wet gasp. "Papa?" She ran into the living room. He was on the floor, clutching his chest. His face was a terrible ashen gray. The oxygen tube was on the floor, ripped from his nose. He was clawing at his throat, his eyes wide with panic. "Papa!" She dropped to her knees. He wasn't breathing. He was making a sound, but no air was going in. She grabbed her phone, her fingers fumbling, slipping on the screen. 911. The dispatcher's voice was calm, distant. "Is he conscious? Is he breathing?" "He's trying. He can't. Please, you have to hurry." "An ambulance is being dispatched. Estimated arrival is 10 to 15 minutes. 15 minutes. She looked at her father. His lips were blue. He didn't have 10 minutes. He didn't have 2. She hung up. The last envelope, the one that had arrived yesterday. She hadn't had time to return it. It was on the counter, under a pile of final notice bills. She ripped it open, the cash scattered. She didn't care. Inside, there was always a business card. She'd always thrown them away. But this time, it was still there. Plain white card, no company, no last name. Just Dario, and a number. Her hands were shaking so hard she dialed it wrong twice. On the third try, it connected. It rang once. Yes. Not hello, just yes. It's Savannah Ruiz. Her voice cracked, shattered. My father. He can't breathe. He's on the floor. The ambulance. They said 15 minutes. He doesn't have... What is your address, Sal? He commanded. No panic, no questions, just cold, hard steel. She sobbed it out. The street, the apartment number. I'm 5 minutes away. Unlock your door. He hung up. She ran to the door, her fingers fumbling with the deadbolt. She left it wide open, a gaping hole. She ran back to her father, grabbing his hand. It was cold. It's okay, Papa. It's okay. Help is coming. She was lying. She didn't know. It wasn't 5 minutes, it was 3. She heard them. Not a siren. Footsteps, heavy, running footsteps on the stairs. Dario Moretti filled the doorway. Wasn't in a suit. He was in jeans and a dark gray t-shirt, his arms corded with muscle. He was damp, as if he'd run from his car in the rain. He was not alone. 2 other men were with him. One was Sal, the other was a stranger in scrubs, carrying a black tactical medical bag. Dario didn't look at her. His eyes went straight to her father. He's in V-fib, the medic said, already on his knees, checking for a pulse, pulling a syringe from his bag. Get him in the car, Dario commanded. Sal and the medic were lifting him, as gently as one would lift a child, but with a speed that was terrifying. Wait, Savannah choked. The ambulance... He'll be at the hospital before they've left their station, Dario said. He was already moving back into the hall. He stopped in the doorway and looked at her. She was frozen, a small, powerless girl in a tiny, falling-apart apartment, her entire world collapsing in on itself. His eyes were dark, but for the first time, she didn't see coldness. She saw control. Absolute, terrifying control. Savannah, he said. His voice was low, but it cut through her panic. Come, now. She grabbed her keys from the hook, not even bothering to grab a jacket. She ran out of the apartment, leaving the door open, the soup boiling over on the stove. She followed him. She had no other choice. The ride to the hospital was a blur of high-speed, terrifying silence. Savannah sat in the back of the Escalade, her father's head cradled in her lap, the medic working on him with a grim, focused intensity. Dario drove, and the city, which had always seemed a mess of traffic and noise, parted for them. He didn't use a siren, but it was as if the other cars sensed the sheer, dangerous weight of his vehicle and simply moved. They didn't go to the local Brooklyn County Hospital, the one with the cracked linoleum and the 20-hour wait times. Dario drove straight over the bridge and into Manhattan, pulling up to the private glass and steel entrance of a hospital Savannah had only ever seen in magazines. Before the car had even fully stopped, a team was waiting, a gurney, a chief of surgery, not an orderly, a surgeon, and 2 nurses. They were on him in a second. What do we have, Mike? The surgeon asked Dario's medic. He's stabilized, but it was a severe cardiac event, full history of congestive heart failure. His daughter has the meds list. The medic, Mike, reported. Dario was out of the car, his hand on Savannah's arm. She was frozen, still staring at the empty space where her father had been. Give them the list, Savannah, he said. His voice wasn't harsh, but it was absolute. It broke her paralysis. She fumbled in her pocket, pulling out the crumpled, folded piece of paper that lived in her wallet, the list of her father's unpronounceable medications. The surgeon glanced at it and nodded, his eyes sharp. We've got him. He's in the best hands in the city. You, he pointed at a nurse. Get her to a private waiting room. No, Dario said. The surgeon, a man who radiated an authority of his own, turned to look at Dario. She doesn't wait in a room, Dario said, his voice low. She waits where she can see the door to his, and you, he said, his gaze pinning the surgeon, will come to me with the updates. Not a nurse, not a resident, you. The surgeon held his gaze for a long moment. There was a silent, primal negotiation of power. Then the surgeon nodded. "Just once. As you wish. He's my only priority." "He's my priority," Dario corrected him, "and you will treat him as such." He guided Savannah, who was moving like a ghost, through a set of private doors, down a hallway that was carpeted and smelled faintly of lemon, not bleach. It was a wing of the hospital she never would have been allowed to walk in, much less occupy. At the end of the hall was the cardiac intensive care unit. Her father was wheeled through the double doors. Dario stopped her just outside. He pointed to a small, alcove-like room opposite the doors. It was furnished with plush chairs and had its own coffee machine. "You wait here," he said. "I can't," she whispered. I need to be—" "You will be," he said. "You sit, you drink, you breathe." He didn't just tell her to wait. He waited with her. He didn't sit in the room with her. He took up a position against the wall opposite her, just outside her door, standing. He was a sentinel, a statue of quiet, unyielding presence. He crossed his arms over his chest, his dark t-shirt stretching over the hard lines of his shoulders and biceps. He wasn't looking at her. He was watching the doors to the ICU. Hours passed. Nurses came and went, their sneakers squeaking. They all gave Dario a wide, respectful berth. They looked at him, then at Savannah, and seemed to come to a silent, swift conclusion. They brought her water she didn't drink and blankets she didn't use. Dario did not move. He didn't check a phone. He didn't make a call. He didn't pace. He simply stood, solid, unwavering, a fixed point in her collapsing universe. It was almost 4 a.m. when the surgeon finally came out. He looked tired, but satisfied. He walked directly to Dario, who uncrossed his arms. "He's alive," the surgeon said, pulling off his surgical cap. "It was close. We had to perform an emergency angioplasty. He had a 98% blockage in the left anterior descending artery. We call it the Widowmaker for a reason. But the procedure was a success. He's stable. He's sedated. He will live." Savannah, who had drifted to the doorway of her room, heard the words, "He's alive." The strength that had held her together, the sheer, white-knuckled adrenaline that had fueled her for the last 10 years, finally snapped. A sound, half-sob, half-strangled cry tore from her throat. Her knees gave out. She didn't fall to the floor. She just folded in on herself, her hands covering her face as the dams of exhaustion, terror, and now a brutal, bone-deep relief finally broke. She wept. She wept for her father, for the lost years, for the mountain of debt, for the grease trap at the diner, for the sheer, grinding hopelessness of it all. Dario was in front of her. He hadn't touched her. He just knelt, his large frame blocking her from the curious-eyed surgeon, from the hallway, from the entire world. He created a private, safe space for her to shatter in. He didn't pat her back. He didn't say, "It's okay." He didn't offer tissues or platitudes. He just waited. He absorbed her grief with his silence, his presence a shield. He was the only person in her entire life who had shown up in a moment of crisis and not asked her for something. He hadn't asked her for comfort or for strength or for a solution. He had simply handled it. After a long time, her sobs quieted into ragged, shuddering breaths. She finally looked up at him through her wet eyelashes. He was still kneeling, his expression unreadable, but his eyes were fixed on her. "Why?" she whispered, her voice raw. "You don't know me. You don't know him. You paid for this wing, that surgeon. Why are you doing this?" Dario was silent for a moment, his dark eyes searching her face. He seemed to be weighing his words, not as if they were lies, but as if they were heavy, valuable, and not to be spent lightly. He finally spoke, his voice a low, rough rumble that was for her ears only. "You saved my man. You stood in a diner with a 6-inch blade against a gun for a stranger." "He was a customer," she mumbled, wiping her face. "He was my family," Dario corrected her, a note of steel in his voice. "Blood. You had no stake. You had no reason. But you did it. That is a debt. My family. We pay our debts, so now I save you." "I'm not your family," she said, though the words lacked their usual fire. "No," he agreed, and a strange, almost imperceptible softening happened around his eyes. You're something else." He stood up then, a fluid, powerful motion. He offered her his hand. It was large, his fingers long, his knuckles scarred. She stared at it. It was the hand of a man who broke things. It was the hand of a man who built things. After a long hesitation, she placed her small, trembling hand in his. His skin was warm, his grip impossibly firm. He didn't yank her up. He pulled steadily until she was on her feet, and he didn't let go until she was balanced. "He'll be in recovery for 12 hours, then a private room. You can't see him for 2, he said. "You need to sleep." "I'm not leaving." "I didn't say you were leaving." He nodded to Sal, who had appeared as silently as a ghost at the end of the hall. "Sal will sit here. He will not move. No one will come near this hallway. The room you were in has a couch that becomes a bed. Sleep for 2 hours." It was not a request. It was an instruction for her own survival. And for the first time, she was too tired to fight. She just nodded. That day was the beginning. Her father recovered, with a speed that was a testament to what Dario's kind of money could buy. He was moved to a private room that looked more like a hotel suite, with a view of Central Park. Doctors, specialists, and nutritionists were in and out. His entire medical file, his entire debt, was handled. It disappeared, wiped clean as if it had never existed. Savannah lived at the hospital for a week. Dario did not, but his presence was everywhere. The food that was delivered to her room, not from the hospital cafeteria, but from 5-star restaurants, the soft, clean change of clothes that appeared one morning, the silent, dark-suited men who stood at the end of the hallway. When her father was finally stable, able to talk, she went back to their apartment to get his things. It was clean. The soup she had left boiling on the stove was gone. The pot was scrubbed and sitting in the drying rack. The entire apartment had been professionally cleaned. Her front door now had a new, heavy-duty deadbolt. She knew who had done it. A week later, her father was moved from the hospital to a private, long-term care facility, not a nursing home, but a state-of-the-art rehabilitation center in the countryside, with green lawns and 24-hour specialist care. She fought him on it. "I can't let you do this," she'd said, meeting him in the hospital lobby, the only place she could find him. This is too much." "He needs it," Dario said simply. "You cannot give it to him. It's done." "What do you want from me?" she demanded, her voice rising. "What is the price for all this, Dario? Tell me, because I know nothing is free." He looked at her, his head tilted. "The price," he said slowly, "is that you stop working at the diner." She was stunned. "What?" "You're done. You're not going back. It's not safe. After your reward was refused, my rivals," he said the word with a cold distaste, "have been paying attention. They know I am interested. Going back there is a liability. It's a weakness. For you and for me." "So I'm just supposed to what? Sit in my apartment? Take your charity?" "No," he said. "You're going to work for me." His offer was simple. He entertained, small. Private gatherings at his penthouse, business dinners. He needed a chef, not a caterer, someone private, someone he could trust, someone who wasn't a part of his world, who wouldn't listen at the doors. "You want me to be your cook?" "I want you to be my private chef," he corrected. "The pay is 10 times what you made at the diner. The environment is safe. You will be picked up. You will be dropped off. You will cook. You will be invisible. And you will be protected." She hesitated. It was a lifeline. It was also a chain. He was pulling her deeper, tying her to him with threads of gratitude and debt, and now employment. "I don't know how to cook for men like you," she said. A small smile, a tiny, almost invisible quirk of his lips appeared. I've had your food. Savannah, when I came to the diner, I ordered the shepherd's pie. It was the only good thing in that place. He had come to the diner before the robbery. He had been watching her for longer than she knew. The thought sent a chill down her spine that was equal parts fear and something else, something she was terrified to name. She accepted. She had no choice. Her father's care was contingent on Dario's goodwill. Her old life was gone. This was the only door open. Working at Dario Moretti's penthouse was like stepping into another dimension. The building was a sleek, glass needle piercing the skyline. The private elevator opened directly into his apartment, a 2-story expanse of glass, steel, and shadow. The kitchen was a chef's dream, larger than her entire apartment, stocked with everything she could possibly imagine. Copper pots hung gleaming. Knives were balanced works of art. The pantry was stocked with ingredients she'd only read about. She saw the duality of his life immediately. The living space was filled with art, a real Rothko, a dark, brooding canvas of red and black, hung on one wall. A grand piano sat in a corner. Shelves were filled with first-edition books, Hemingway, Tolstoy, poetry. And then there was the other side, the brutal calls. She would be prepping a delicate wine-poached pear dessert, and she would hear his voice from his office, a low, cold river of anger. He spoke in Italian sometimes, a language that sounded beautiful until he spoke it. From him. It was a weapon. It was sharp and hard and final. Men came and went. Sal, the other suited men, they spoke in low tones. They never looked at her. She was a ghost. Dario, however, always saw her. He made it a habit to be there when she was prepping. He would lean against the marble island in his suit, his tie loosened, and just watch her work. He would ask her to taste. She would be stirring a sauce, a complex reduction. She'd hold out a spoon, her hand steady, but her heart hammering. He wouldn't take the spoon. He would lean in, guiding her hand to his lips, and taste it directly from the spoon she held. His eyes would never leave hers. "More salt," he'd murmur, his voice rough. His hand would brush hers as he reached for a wine glass, a lingering look at her lips as she bit into a strawberry to test its ripeness. It was a slow, simmering burn, a tension so thick it felt like a physical weight in the room. He never crossed a line. He never said a crude word, but his intent was a tangible thing. He was courting her, in the only way he knew how, in silence, with proximity, with his undivided, unnerving attention. One night, she was finishing up. It was late, almost midnight. She had cooked for 6 of his closest associates. The dinner had been quiet, tense. She had heard a glass break in the other room, a low, sharp argument. Now, they were gone. She was wiping down the stainless steel counters, her apron neatly folded, ready to call for her driver. Dario walked into the kitchen. He had taken off his suit jacket. His white shirt was unbuttoned at the collar. His sleeves rolled up, revealing strong, lightly haired forearms. He looked exhausted and dangerous. "They're gone," he said. "Yes, the kitchen is clean. I'll be leaving." "It's raining," he said, as if to himself. As if summoned by his words, a loud crack of thunder shook the building. The windows of the penthouse, which made up the entire west wall, were suddenly alive with a violent, sheeting downpour. The sky was black, then brilliant white, then black again. "The streets will be flooded," he said. "The driver will take an hour to get here, and another to get you home. It's not safe." "I can wait," she said, her hands suddenly clammy. "No." He walked to a cabinet, pulling out a dark cashmere robe. "You'll stay. The guest room is prepared." "Dario, I can't, I shouldn't." He turned, the robe in his hand. "You're soaked." He was right. She'd been caught in the initial spray just walking to her car earlier. Her simple jeans and t-shirt were damp and cold. "You'll be sick." "Go. Take a shower. A hot one. There are dry clothes, and I'll make you tea." He, the mafia boss, was going to make her tea. The world had turned upside down. She was too tired to argue, and the thought of a hot shower was too tempting. The guest suite was Of course. Larger than her old apartment, the bathroom was a cave of black marble. She stood under the scalding water for a long time, letting it wash away the tension of the night. When she stepped out, she saw the clothes he'd left, not a guest outfit. It was a simple, thick, dark t-shirt, his, and a pair of new, black silk pajama bottoms, still with the tag on. She pulled the shirt on. It was huge, falling to her mid-thigh. It smelled of him, not of cologne, but of clean, expensive soap, and a faint masculine scent of cedar and something metallic. It was the most intimate thing she had ever experienced. She padded out of the bedroom, barefoot, her hair a damp, dark curtain around her shoulders. The silk pants whispered as she moved. He was in the living room. The lights were dim. The storm was raging outside, a dramatic, violent backdrop to the quiet in the room. He was standing by the window, a mug in each hand. He turned as he heard her. He looked at her, and his face, which she had only ever seen as a mask of cold control, changed. He didn't look at her with lust. He looked at her gently, reverently. His eyes traced the line of her throat, the way the dark shirt clung to her damp skin, the small, bare feet on his polished floor. He looked at her like she was the first and only good thing he had ever seen. He set the mugs down on the coffee table. He didn't speak. He walked toward her. She didn't move. She couldn't. Her breath was trapped in her lungs. He stopped in front of her, so close she could feel the heat radiating from his body. He was so much taller than her. She had to tilt her head back to look at him. Slowly, as if he was afraid she would bolt, he raised his hand. His fingers were warm. He brushed a damp strand of hair back from her cheek, his thumb grazing her skin. The simple touch was electric. It was a jolt, straight to her core. "Savannah," he whispered, her name. It was the first time he'd said it with anything other than command. Now, it was a question. It was a prayer. She leaned in. She didn't know she was doing it until it was done. Her body, of its own accord, was moving toward his. Her eyes fluttered shut. She could feel his breath, warm and sweet with the tea he'd been drinking, on her lips. His other hand came up to cup her jaw, his thumb stroking the soft skin just below her ear. This was it, the kiss, the one that had been building for weeks. She pulled away. Her eyes flew open. She staggered back a step, the spell broken, shame and a cold, bitter reality crashing down on her. "What am I doing?" she whispered, horrified at herself. I'm in your shirt, in your house. My father is in your debt, and I'm—" "You are here," he said, his voice rough, his hands still half raised. "I am a fool," she said, wrapping her arms around herself, a sudden, desperate need to cover the shirt, his shirt, from his view. "I am a girl from a diner, a poor girl." She backed away, her voice rising with a bitter, hysterical edge. "Do you know what they say? What everyone knows? Girls like me. We don't get this. We don't get the penthouse or the safe life. We get used. We get discarded. Nobody marries a poor girl. Dario. They just rent us until they're bored." She was shaking. The old, familiar bitterness of her life, the voice that had always whispered she was worthless, now screaming in her ear. She had almost let him. She had almost believed the look in his eyes. Dario stood there, watching her, his face hardening, the gentleness gone, replaced by a dark, simmering intensity. He let her words, all the poison, hang in the air between them. He took a step toward her, and another. He walked until he was in front of her again, backing her against a column, trapping her with his body, his hands on the marble on either side of her head. He was close. His scent was overwhelming. She stared at his throat, at the hard line of his jaw. "Is that what you think this is?" he said, his voice a low, dangerous growl. "Rent?" It's what it always is." "Look at me," he commanded. She forced her eyes up to his. There was a fire in them now, a cold, determined rage that wasn't directed at her, but at the world, at the voices she was repeating. "They are wrong," he said. "The world is wrong. You are not poor. You are rich in things this world doesn't know how to value. You are rich in loyalty. You are rich in strength. You are not a girl to be rented." He leaned in, his lips so close to hers she could feel the words, his breath a hot promise against her skin. "Let them talk," he whispered, his voice low and rough, and full of a certainty that shook her to her very soul. "Let's prove them all wrong." His words hung in the air, a promise that was equal parts threat and vow. Let's prove them all wrong. Savannah didn't go to the guest room that night. The storm had broken. Inside and out, she had stared at him, her heart a wild drum against her ribs, and had given a single, trembling nod, not a nod of agreement, but a nod of surrender to the moment. He had taken her hand, his grip firm, and led her to the guest room himself. He had stopped at the door. "Sleep, Savannah," he'd said, his voice rough. "We have time." But time, it turned out, was a new kind of tension. Their dynamic had been rewritten. She still came to the penthouse to cook, but it was no longer a job. It was a pretense. A stage where they both performed their old roles, while a new, far more dangerous play unfolded in the subtext. The touches, once accidental, were now deliberate. She would be at the stove, reducing a sauce, and he would come up behind her. Ostensibly to look into the pot, she would feel the heat of his body, a solid wall an inch from her back. He would murmur, "It needs something," and his hand would come around hers, his fingers lacing with hers on the handle of the spoon as he guided it, lifting it for her to taste. She would sip, her eyes locked with his reflection in the dark glass of the oven, her blood turning to fire. The glances were heavier. He would hold business meetings in the dining room, his voice a cold, hard monotone, but his eyes would find her. She would be in the kitchen, visible through the glass partition, and he would watch her. He would watch her chop vegetables. His gaze so intense she could feel it on her hands. He would watch her bite her lip in concentration, and she would see the slight, almost invisible tightening of his jaw. He was learning her. She was learning him. She learned he drank his coffee with 2 sugars in the morning, a fact he seemed to hide from the rest of the world, which only ever saw him drink it black. She learned he had a scar, a thin, white line that ran from his left shoulder blade to his spine, which she glimpsed when he was changing after a run. She learned he hated the color yellow, loved the smell of old books, and had a silence that was, she realized, not empty, but full. It was a silence of thought, of observation. And he learned her. He learned she hummed when she was truly focused. He learned she loved gardenias, a fact she'd let slip once, and 2 days later, a massive, fragrant gardenia bush was sitting on the penthouse terrace. He learned that her strength, the thing he'd first admired, was a brittle shield over a deep, profound vulnerability. One evening, he was in the kitchen as she plated a meal for his associates. He was in her space, handing her plates, a beautiful, stark white porcelain. "This is not for them, Mari," he said. "It's for your guests," she replied, confused. "It's for us. They can have the takeout I ordered." She looked up. He was serious. He had sent Sal out for 4 large, identical bags from a local steakhouse. "Dario, they're your associates. They're my employees, and tonight I am not their boss." He took the plate of intricate, pan-seared scallops from her. "Tonight I'm eating with my chef." That night, they ate together on the terrace. The city spread out below them like a carpet of fallen stars. The air was cool, but she felt nothing but warmth. A week later, he came to her while she was packing up. "I have an engagement. Next Thursday, a charity gala." "I'll have a menu planned," she said, wiping her hands. "You will not be cooking," he said. He was standing close, his dark suit absorbing the light in the kitchen. "You will be attending." Her hands stilled. "Attending as what?" "As my guest," he said, his voice flat, but his eyes were not. His eyes were watching her, waiting for her reaction. "Dario, I can't," she said, her voice small. "A gala, I don't have anything to wear. I wouldn't fit in." "I did not ask if you would fit in," he said, his voice softening. He took a step closer, cupping her elbow, his thumb stroking the soft skin of her inner arm. "I am telling you, you will be there, with me. As for the other," he gestured vaguely, "it's been handled." Handled was an understatement. On the day of the gala, a long black garment bag was delivered to her old apartment. She hadn't moved out yet, a fact that seemed to bother Dario, but she wasn't ready to let go of that last piece of herself. She unzipped the bag. Inside was not a glittering ball gown. It was not covered in sequins or feathers. It was a dress of deep, midnight blue silk, so dark it was almost black. It had a high neckline, long sleeves, and a cut so simple, so elegant. It must have cost more than a car. It was a dress meant to highlight the woman, not the garment. It was a dress she would have chosen if she'd had the means, the knowledge, the world. When she put it on, it fit as if it had been made for her, and she realized, with a sinking, soaring feeling, it probably had. Dario sent a car for her, not his usual Escalade, a sleek, black, vintage Bentley. The driver, a man she didn't recognize, simply opened the door and nodded. They arrived at a museum, its marble facade lit up, valets in tuxedos running. She stepped out, her old, simple black heels sinking into a plush red carpet. She felt like an imposter. And then she saw him. He was waiting at the top of the steps, not with the other guests, but alone. He was in a black tuxedo, tailored to perfection. He looked like a king, a dark, handsome predator in a room full of peacocks. He wasn't smiling. He was just watching her, his gaze sweeping over her, from the simple, clean line of her hair, down the silk of the dress, to her feet, and back up. When his eyes met hers, he didn't smile, but a fire was lit. He held out his hand. She walked up the steps, her heart beating a strange, unsteady rhythm. She placed her hand in his. His grip was warm, possessive. He tucked her arm into the crook of his, pulling her close against his side. "You," he murmured, his voice a low rumble just for her, as he bent his head, "are the most powerful woman in this room. Remember that." He guided her inside. The room was a sea of glittering jewels, of false laughter, of champagne flutes. It was beautiful, and it was terrifying. Every eye was on them, or rather, every eye was on him, and then every eye slid to her. She heard the whispers. They were not subtle. "Who is that?" "It's no one. Look at her dress, so plain." "I heard he's been seeing her. Sal said she was a waitress from some grease trap in Brooklyn." "A waitress, Dario Moretti?" "She's a girl from the streets, a toy. He'll be bored in a week." Savannah's face burned. She felt the blood drain from her cheeks. The silk of her dress suddenly felt like a cheap costume. The simple, elegant cut now just looked poor. She tried to pull her arm from his, to put a small space between them, but his grip tightened. "Dario," she whispered, her voice tight with humiliation. "Let them talk," he said, his voice cold, his gaze fixed forward. He nodded at a passing politician, who practically bowed. "No," she said, her voice shaking. She couldn't breathe. The air was too thick with perfume and judgment. I need a minute." She tugged, hard, surprised by her force. His grip loosened, and she fled. She didn't know where she was going. She just pushed through the crowd, past the ice sculptures, past the string quartet, until she found a glass door that led to a small, dark, marble terrace. The cold night air hit her face. She gripped the balustrade, her knuckles white, and tried not to cry. They were right. She was a poor girl. She was a toy. And she had been stupid, so stupid to believe his words, to believe she was anything else. The door opened behind her. She didn't have to look. She felt him. "Savannah." "Go away," she whispered, her back to him. "Go back to your party. I'm an embarrassment, and they're right. turn around, and it was a command. No, she heard his footsteps on the marble. His hands, large and warm, landed on her shoulders. He didn't turn her. He just held her, his thumbs rubbing small, soothing circles through the silk. They are insects. Savannah, they're whispers. They have no power. They do, she said, her voice thick. They're right. I'm a waitress. I'm a girl from the streets. I don't belong here. Good, he said, his voice a growl. I don't belong here either. He gently, but irresistibly, turned her to face him. He was a shadow against the bright lights of the party. His face was hard, his jaw set, his eyes burning with an anger that wasn't for her. He framed her face with his hands. His palms were rough against her soft skin. They are nothing, he said, his voice low, intense. They are bought, they are sold, they are fake. You are the only real thing in that entire room. You are the only person who hasn't lied tonight. You are the only one who is not for sale. She looked up at him, a tear finally escaping, tracing a cold path down her cheek. His expression broke. The anger softened into something else, something fierce and raw and possessive. His thumb moved, wiping the tear away with a tenderness that shattered her. I answer to no one, he whispered, his forehead touching hers. Not to them, not to the politicians, not to their whispers. His voice dropped, became a rough, intimate growl. But I answer to you. And he kissed her. It was not a gentle kiss. It was not the chaste, near miss in his apartment. It was a kiss of fire and rage and possession. It was a claiming. It was a silencing. Not of her, but of the entire world. His lips were hard, demanding, as he poured all of his frustration, all of his dark, controlled intensity into her. She gasped, and he took the breath, his hand sliding from her jaw down her back, splaying against her spine, pulling her flush against the hard, unyielding lines of his body. She wasn't a poor girl. She wasn't a waitress. In that moment, she was his. She was the center of his universe. Her hands, which had been pressed against his chest, fisted in the lapels of his tuxedo. She kissed him back, with all the fear and the hope and the terrible, beautiful longing she had kept locked inside. He pulled back, just enough to breathe, his lips still brushing hers. "Let them talk," he panted, his voice hoarse. He took her hand and, without a word, led her straight back through the party, past the staring, whispering faces, past the ice sculptures, and out the front doors. He didn't look at anyone. He only looked at her. The ride back to the penthouse was a roaring silence. The tension in the Bentley was a living thing. She was vibrating, her skin alive, her lips still burning from his kiss. He dismissed the driver. The elevator ride up, just the two of them, was an eternity. He didn't touch her. He just watched her. He watched her as she breathed. He watched her as she licked her still swollen lips. The elevator doors opened, chiming softly, into the dark penthouse, the city lights a glittering backdrop. The second the doors slid shut behind them, the dam broke. He had her pressed against the wall before she could take a full step. His mouth was on hers, not angry this time, but urgent, desperate. It was a kiss of profound, starving need. "Dario," she breathed, her hands in his hair, pulling him closer. "Savannah," he groaned against her mouth, his name for her a broken prayer. His hands were trembling. The man of ice, the man of control, was trembling. He fumbled with the zipper on the back of her dress. She arched, helping him, her skin on fire, needing the air, needing his touch. The silk pulled at her feet in a whisper. She was in her simple, practical underwear, and in the dim light of the city, she felt exposed, vulnerable. He didn't touch her. He just looked. He stripped off his tuxedo jacket, his tie, his fingers working the buttons of his shirt, his eyes never leaving hers. He was unraveling. The control was gone. "You are," he started, his voice thick. "You are beautiful." He kissed her again, but this time it was slow It was a question. It was reverence. His hands, those scarred, dangerous hands, were so gentle. They traced her shoulders, her arms, the curve of her waist, as if he were memorizing her. She was the one who became urgent. This gentle worship was too much. She needed him. She fumbled with his belt, her hands shaking. He chuckled, a low, rough sound, and covered her hands with his. "Let me," he whispered. In moments, they were skin to skin, the cool air of the penthouse on her, the heat of his body on his. It was electric. It was breathless. He didn't just take her to the bedroom. He lifted her, his arms like steel bands, as if she weighed nothing. He laid her on the bed, on his bed, the sheets impossibly soft, impossibly white. He loomed over her, a dark, beautiful shadow against the city lights. "Are you sure?" he whispered, his voice raw. She didn't answer with words. She reached up, her hands tangling in his hair, and pulled him down. It was not a joining. It was a collision. It was emotional, a frantic, desperate need to be closer, to erase the whispers, to prove that this, at least, was real. It was every repressed look, every brush of hands, every moment of simmering tension, finally exploding. It was the whisper of skin on sheets, the sharp intake of breath, the low groans, the names, his and hers, spoken like an incantation in the dark. It was the safest she had ever felt, in the arms of the most dangerous man she had ever known. She woke up slowly, the light in the room a soft, pearly gray. She was in a bed, his bed. She was tangled in sheets that smelled like him. She was alone. A flicker of panic, cold and sharp, the whispers. A toy, bored in a week. Then a smell. Coffee and bacon. She sat up, wrapping the thick, heavy sheet around her. She padded, barefoot, out of the bedroom. He was in the kitchen. He was in a pair of gray sweatpants, low on his hips, and nothing else. His back, the one with the long white scar, was to her. He was barefoot, and he was cooking. He was humming, a low, tuneless sound, as he flipped bacon in a pan. The sight was so impossibly, achingly normal. It broke her heart. He must have sensed her. He turned, a spatula in his hand. He was smiling, not the smirk, not the tight, controlled quirk of his lips, a real, genuine, unguarded smile. It lit up his entire face, erasing the darkness, making him look, for a second, like a man who had never known violence. "Good morning," he said, his voice soft. The smile, the smell of bacon, the normalcy of it. It was too much. She burst into tears. He was across the kitchen in a second. The spatula dropped, his face a mask of panic. "What is it? Are you hurt? Did I—" "No," she sobbed, laughing through the tears. It's the bacon. You're cooking. You're humming." He stared at her. Then a look of profound understanding crossed his face. He pulled her against him, his bare chest warm against her face, his arms wrapping around her, sheet and all. He just held her. "I cook," he murmured into her hair. "I also hum, apparently." They ate breakfast on the terrace, wrapped in his cashmere robes, the city just waking up below. When they were done, he took her hands. The smile was gone. His face was serious. "Savannah," he said, his voice back to its familiar, low rumble. Last night, it was real. For me, this is real." She just nodded, her heart in her throat. "I'm serious indeed," he said. "I want you beside me, not as my chef, not as my guest, as mine." The word should have terrified her. It should have felt like a cage. It felt like a shield. "But you have to know," he continued, his grip tightening on her hands, "what that means. My world is not the gala. It's not the penthouse. That is the surface. Underneath." He paused. "The whispers you heard last night, that's the polite version. My enemies, they will not whisper. They will see you as a target. They will see you as my weakness." He leaned in, his eyes boring into hers. "I will protect you. I will burn the world down to keep you safe. I will end anyone who looks at you the wrong way. But they will try. They will try to hurt you to get to me. This is the last time I'm asking. You can walk away. I will set you up. New name, new city, you and your father. You will be safe, and you will never see me again." He gave her a choice, the last choice she would ever have. She looked at him, at this man of violence and bacon, of murder and gardenias, and she knew. "I'm not going anywhere," she whispered. His resolve broke. For a second, he closed his eyes, his head bowing, and he kissed her hands, a long, reverent press of his lips. The real world did not wait long. She went back to her apartment a few days later, to pack, to finally, truly, leave that life behind. Her landlord was waiting for her, a greasy, small-eyed man named Slattery. "Heard you're moving up in the world," he said, blocking her way in the hall. He smelled of stale beer. "Excuse me," she said, trying to push past. "Got a rich boyfriend now, huh?" He leered, his eyes dropping. "I see the fancy cars. Rent's going up. For you, triple a rich boyfriend tax." "You can't do that," she said, her voice shaking. "I can," he said. He grabbed her arm. His grip was surprisingly strong. "Or maybe you and I can work out a different kind of payment, an in-between boyfriends discount." She slapped him hard. He raised his hand to strike her back. She flinched, but the blow never landed. She was on her phone, her fingers flying, dialing the only number she knew. Dario. His voice was calm. "Where are you?" "My apartment. The landlord, he hit me." She was lying, but she didn't care. She was terrified. "He grabbed me." The line was silent, a cold, dead, terrifying silence. "Stay in the apartment," he said, his voice a flat, dead thing. "Lock the door. Do not open it for anyone but me or Sal. I'll handle it." She did as he said. She locked the 3 bolts. She sat on her floor, shaking. She waited for hours. Finally, a knock. "Miss Ruiz, it's Sal." She opened the door, and he was standing there, his face impassive. "It's handled," he said. "You're safe. The boss has arranged for movers. They'll be here in 1 hour." "Handled?" she whispered. She walked past him. Down the stairs, the door to Slattery's apartment was open, just a crack. It was splintered, near the lock. She pushed it. He was on the floor. He wasn't dead. He was groaning, a high-pitched animal sound. His legs were bent at an angle they shouldn't be. He was trying to crawl, but his arms... She backed away, her hand over her mouth. She ran back upstairs. She didn't pack. She just left. She took a cab to the penthouse. She found him in his office. He was standing at the window, his back to her, a glass of dark liquor in his hand. "What did you do?" she whispered. "I did what was necessary," he said, not turning. You crippled him," she choked out. "He put his hands on you," Dario said, his voice a low, cold river. "He threatened you. He will never put his hands on a woman again. He will never threaten anyone again." He turned. His face was a mask of cold, hard resolve. "This is the world, Savannah. This is the price." I don't want this," she said, tears in her eyes. "I don't want that man's pain. I don't want his blood on my hands." He walked over to her, his footsteps silent on the thick carpet. He put the glass down. He took her trembling hands in his. "It is not on your hands," he said, his voice soft, but with an edge of steel. He lifted her hands one by one and kissed her knuckles. "It's on mine, and I will keep it on mine. I will paint my hands red to keep yours clean. That is my promise." She looked at him, at the monster who kept her safe, at the savior who broke men's legs. She was trapped. She was trapped in his protection. She was trapped in his penthouse. She was trapped by his love. And the most terrifying part? She didn't want to be free. Dario's promise to keep his hands red to keep hers clean was a vow that settled over the penthouse like a shroud. The blood was invisible, but she felt its weight everywhere. Their new life began, a strange, surreal existence of intense, domestic intimacy set against a backdrop of unspoken violence. She lived in the penthouse now. Her old apartment was a memory, a life she'd shed like a snake's skin. Her days were no longer her own, they were his. She woke in his bed, the sheets a cloud of Egyptian cotton that smelled of him. She fell asleep to the sound of his breathing, his heavy arm draped possessively over her waist. This was the gilded cage. He gave her everything. A credit card with no limit, which she never used, a wardrobe of beautiful, simple clothes in silks and cashmeres, which he had chosen, and his time, when he was not in his office, a soundproofed fortress of glass and steel. He was with her. But love, in Dario's world, was a synonym for surveillance. She was never alone. When she left the penthouse, a rare, orchestrated event, Sal was with her, a silent, gravel-faced shadow. When she went to the gourmet market to buy ingredients, the driver waited. He told her it was for her protection. She knew it was also for his control. His enemies were not an abstract concept. They were a living, breathing threat, the Valenza family. The name was a hiss, a curse. Dario never spoke it, but she heard it from his men. The Valenzas were old school, a rival faction that saw Dario's more corporate, more controlled empire as an insult. They saw his refusal to engage in certain, less profitable, high-risk trades as a weakness. And now they saw Savannah. Dario's love for her, the very thing that made her feel safe, was the talk of the underworld. The man who had no weaknesses, who was all ice and angles, now had one, a girl from a diner, a soft, vulnerable, civilian target. The Valenzas were patient. They watched. They waited. They knew she visited her father. The rehabilitation center was her only sanctuary. It was the one place that was truly hers, a connection to her old life, a testament to the one good thing Dario's money had done. She went twice a week. On Tuesdays and Fridays, Sal would drive her, wait in the lobby, and she would have 2 hours. It was a Tuesday. The facility was quiet, the smell of sanitizer and roses in the air. Her father was asleep, his breathing deep and even, his face, once gray with worry and sickness, now relaxed. She sat by his bed, holding his hand, reading a book. A new orderly entered. She hadn't seen him before. He was young, with a kind, open face and a bright, "How can I help you?" smile. "Excuse me, Miss Ruiz?" he said, his voice soft. "You have a message at the front desk." "Oh," Savannah said, surprised. "Thank you." She laid her father's hand gently on the blanket and followed the young man out. But he didn't lead her to the front desk. He led her to a small, private waiting room, one she hadn't used before. "It's just in here," he said, holding the door. She stepped inside. The room was empty. The door clicked shut behind her. The lock, a small, definitive, metallic snick. The young man was still smiling, but the smile no longer reached his eyes. It was a mask. "Who are you?" she said, her blood turning to ice. "The front desk is the other way." "We've been admiring your dedication to your father," a new voice said. A man stepped out from a small alcove. He was older, in his 50s, with silver hair and a deeply tanned, leathery face. He wore a suit, but it was expensive in a way that was loud, almost garish. A thick gold watch, a pinky ring. This was Nico Valenza. She knew, instantly, instinctively. "He looks so peaceful," Nico said, ignoring her question. He pulled a phone from his pocket. He showed her a picture. Her father, sleeping in his bed, taken, she realized, moments ago, before she had even left the room. "What do you want?" she whispered, her hands balling into fists. "Dario Moretti," Nico said, pacing the small room. "He's a problem. He's arrogant. He thinks he's better than us. He's forgotten his place. He's forgotten the rules. And now he brings a girl, a civilian, into our world." He tutted, as if genuinely disappointed. "It's sloppy. It's sentimental." He stopped in front of her. "And sentiment," he said, "is leverage." "Dario will kill you," she said, her voice a low, trembling thing. Nico laughed, a dry, humorless sound. He will. He will try. After, of course, after you've done what we ask, after your father is... He made a vague, dismissive gesture. After... Leave him alone, please. He's sick. He's safe, Nico countered. He's in a beautiful, expensive, private room, paid for by Dario. We can change that. We can move him to a county hospital, to a basement, or... He shrugged. We can stop his heart. It's so easy. A man like that, just too much potassium in his drip, a pillow. No one would even question it. Savannah's stomach heaved. She felt the bile rise in her throat. What do you want? She choked out. Information. He snapped his fingers. The orderly stepped forward, placing a small, black burner phone on the table. You are in his home. You are in his bed. You hear things, his schedule, who he meets with, when he makes large shipments, small things. I don't know any of that. You will, Nico said. You'll listen, or we'll stop your father's breathing. For good, it's your choice. You have 1 week to make contact. The orderly unlocked the door. Nico Valenza walked out, patting her on the cheek as he passed. His hand was cold, his skin like dry paper. You're a smart girl, Savannah. Don't be stupid. The orderly, the one with the kind smile, was the last to leave. He paused in the doorway. Don't try to tell anyone. Sal, in the lobby, he's good, but he's one man. We have 3 in this building. We've been here for a month. We are the janitors. We are the orderlies. We are the kitchen staff. We are everywhere. He left. She was alone. She slid to the floor, her body shaking so violently her teeth chattered. She told Sal she was feeling ill. He took one look at her ashen, terrified face and rushed her back to the penthouse. Dario was waiting. He was in his office when she came in, but he must have heard the elevator because he was out in the foyer in a second. He saw her, and his face, which had been set in its usual hard lines, changed. What is it? He demanded. What's wrong? Nothing, she lied, her voice a high, thin sound. I'm just tired. I think I'm getting a cold. She pushed past him, her legs unsteady, and locked herself in the master bathroom. She turned on the shower, the water scalding hot, and sat on the cold marble floor, fully clothed. As the room filled with steam, she had to protect her father, but Dario... Telling Dario would start a war that would put her father in the crossfire. The Valenzas had built a perfect prison. They hadn't trapped her. They had trapped her father and given her the key to his cell, a key she could only turn by betraying the man she loved. She began to distance herself. It was a slow, agonizing poison. She stopped humming in the kitchen. She moved out of the master bedroom. Claiming she was a restless sleeper and didn't want to disturb him, she took over one of the guest suites, a room of cool, impersonal grays. When he touched her, she flinched, not because she didn't want him, but because the touch itself felt like a lie. Her body, her hands, her mind, they were all potential weapons. Dario was not a stupid man. He was a man who read silence better than most people read books. He was confused, and he was hurt. What is this? Savannah, he demanded one night, catching her as she tried to slip past his office. He had her by the arm, his grip not painful, but unbreakable. I can't, she'd whispered, not meeting his eyes. This is all of this. It's too much. The gala, the landlord, it's your world. Dario, it's too much. I need space. I need to think. The words felt like ash in her mouth. She was using his world as an excuse, the very world she was now being forced to participate in. His face had gone cold. He had looked at her for a long, hard minute, his dark eyes searching hers for a truth she was desperate to hide. Then he had let her go. Fine, well, he said, his voice flat. Space. You can have space. He respected her request. He didn't come to her room. He didn't touch her. He just watched her. The penthouse, once a warm home, became a cold, silent prison occupied by two ghosts. The burner phone was a toxic weight in her purse. On the 6th day, she used it. She sent a text. He's meeting with his shipping managers tomorrow. It was harmless. He met with them every Wednesday. It was public knowledge. The reply was instant. Good girl, not enough. The next day, she texted, he's having dinner at Cipriani's tonight with 3 associates. Again, harmless. A public place. She was trying to appease them, to give them just enough to keep her father alive. She was walking a tightrope of smoke, and it was disintegrating beneath her. She was slowly dying. She wasn't sleeping. She lost weight. She jumped at every sound. Dario watched it all. His face was a mask of granite. He was waiting. He found her one night at 3 a.m. She was in the kitchen, staring at the burner phone, which sat on the marble island like a black, venomous spider. She was crying, silent, desperate tears. She didn't hear him enter. You can lie to anyone, Savannah. His voice came from the darkness, low and rough with a pain she had never heard. Not to me. She gasped, spinning around. He was there, a shadow in the doorway, dressed in the gray sweatpants he slept in. Dario, I have given you space, he said, walking into the kitchen, his bare feet silent on the stone. He didn't look at her. He looked at the phone. I have given you silence. I have waited for you to come to me, for you to tell me what has you so terrified. You look at me like I'm the monster you've been afraid of. You're not a monster, she whispered, her hands shaking. Then what is this? He picked up the phone. He didn't need to turn it on. He knew. Who has you? Who has this power over you, that you would lie to me, that you would break us? The words wouldn't come. Who? He commanded, his voice a low, dangerous growl. The Valenzas, she whispered. The air in the room changed. It became pressurized. The silence was no longer a silence of ghosts. It was the silence of a bomb. He closed his eyes, just for a second. When he opened them, the man who made her breakfast was gone. The boss was back. What did they threaten? It was not a question. My father, she sobbed, the truth finally, terribly, coming out. They're at the facility. They're the staff. They're everywhere. They showed me a picture. They said they would. They would stop his heart. I had to. I only told them. I told them harmless things, Dario. I promise. Things you do in public. I was just trying to keep him alive. He was not looking at her. He was staring at the phone, his jaw working, a muscle in his temple ticking. He was furious. But the fury, she realized, was not for her. You should have come to me, he said, his voice a dead, cold flatline. And you would have done what? She screamed, the hysteria finally breaking. Started a war? Sent your men in? They would have killed him, Dario. They would have killed him before you got to the first floor. It was a perfect trap, and I was the only one who could try. So you let them use you, he said. He smashed the phone, his fist coming down on the marble, shattering the small device into 100 pieces. You let them turn you? You let them win. I was trying to protect him. I was trying to protect you. You protected no one, he roared, his voice bouncing off the hard surfaces, the first time he had ever raised his voice to her. You gave them what they wanted. You gave them leverage. You gave them me? As if summoned, the shattered pieces of the phone on the counter lit up. The screen was broken, but it was alive. A text message. She stared at it. He stared at it. He pieced the words together from the fractured, lit-up screen. Knows. He's angry. We have to get you out. Meet us. Now. The old warehouse on Pier 12. Come alone, or your father is dead. This is your last chance. It was the final turn of the screw. It's them, she whispered, her blood running cold. They know. They knew you'd. They knew. Dario. My father. We have to. I have to go." "It's a trap," he said, his voice a low growl. He was already moving, walking out of the kitchen. "I don't care, I have to go. Dario!" She ran after him. He was in the bedroom, not his, but hers. He was pulling a small metal box from under her bed, a box she had never seen. "Dario, what are you—" He opened it, a small, black handgun, and a tracker, a small, flat disc. He'd put a tracker in her room. He had never stopped watching her. "They aren't stupid," he said, his voice calm, the rage gone, replaced by something much, much colder. "They knew I'd find the phone. They were counting on it. This was not for you. This was for me. They want me at that warehouse." "Then don't go," she cried. "I'll go. I'll—" "You'll do nothing, he said. He was pulling on a black t-shirt, dark pants. "You'll stay here, you'll lock the doors, and you will not move until Sal comes for you." "No," she said, grabbing his arm. "No, you can't. They'll kill you, and they'll kill him. I'm the one they want. I'm the leverage. I'll go." He looked at her, his hand on the gun. "They don't want you. Savannah, they want to use you. To get me. They've miscalculated." "What are you going to do?" He grabbed his phone, his own. He dialed a number. "Sal, it's time. Plan. Valenza, Pier 12. Yes, now. Full team." He hung up. He looked at her. "I'm going to end this." "No, not without me," she said, a sudden, cold resolve filling her. "I started this. I am the bait. If they see you, they'll kill him. But if they see me—" He stared at her, seeing the new cold fire in her eyes. The terror was gone, replaced by an acceptance. "It's a trap," he said again. "I know," she said. "I'm his daughter. I'm the one they're waiting for. Let me walk in. You do what you have to do." He stared at her for a long, terrible moment. Then he nodded. "You will not go alone. You will be in my car. You will do exactly as I say." The warehouse on Pier 12 was a long-forgotten metal carcass, smelling of rust, salt, and dead fish. Dario killed the lights on the Escalade a mile out. He drove in the dark, the engine a low, powerful hum. "They'll be watching the front," he murmured, his voice low, his eyes scanning the darkness. "We're not going to the front." He didn't. He drove the car through the back of the building, not through a door, through a wall of rotted, corrugated tin that crumpled like paper. The Escalade roared into the vast, dark space, its high beams flashing on, illuminating a scene of chaos. Nico Valenza was there, standing on a raised platform, a dozen of his men scattered below, and in the center, tied to a chair, was a man with a bag over his head. "Papa!" Savannah screamed. The men turned, stunned, their guns coming up. "Now, Sal!" Dario yelled into a small, built-in mic. The world exploded. The side doors of the warehouse blew open, not with a bomb, but with the force of Sal and 5 other men, Dario's men hitting them at once. It was not a Hollywood gunfight. It was a war. It was loud, a terrifying, deafening cacophony of sound, the pop, pop, pop of handguns, the boom of a shotgun, men yelling, screaming, the high-pitched ping of bullets ricocheting off metal. Savannah screamed, her hands over her ears. Dario was out of the car. He wasn't shooting. He was moving. He was a shadow, a blur of motion. He had a man by the arm, and Savannah heard a sharp, wet crack, and the man went down, screaming. He took a gun from another, using the man as a shield before throwing him into 2 others. He was ruthless. He was not the man who made her bacon. He was not the man who kissed her at the gala. He was a monster. A beautiful, terrifying, dark storm of violence. He was moving, not toward Valenza, but toward the chair, toward her father. Nico Valenza, on the platform, was watching his men fall. He saw Dario. He raised his own gun, not at Dario, but at the man in the chair. "No!" Savannah shrieked, launching herself from the Escalade. "Savannah, stay in the car," Dario roared. She ran, a stupid, desperate, primal need. She ran toward her father. Nico smiled. He turned the gun on her. The stupid, sentimental girl. He fired. She didn't feel the bullet. She felt the impact. Dario, when he had hit her. A full-body tackle. A blur of motion, sending them both skidding across the concrete floor, out of the line of fire. She landed hard, the air knocked from her lungs. Dario was on top of her, his body a heavy, protective weight. She heard a thwack, and another. Dario grunted, a sharp intake of breath. He rolled off her. He was holding his side. His hand was dark. It was wet. "Dario," she whispered. He was on his feet. He had his gun out. He wasn't looking at her. He was looking at Nico Valenza. The fight was over. Sal and his men had the others. It was just the two bosses. "You shot me," Dario said, his voice a low, wondering gravel. He sounded impressed. "And you," Nico spat, his own gun still raised, "brought your weakness to a war." "She is not my weakness," Dario said. He was bleeding, a dark, spreading stain on his black shirt, but he was standing. "She's the only reason you're all still breathing." He raised his gun. Nico raised his. Crack! Crack! 2 shots almost at once. Nico Valenza stood, stunned. He looked down. A red flower bloomed on his white shirt. He crumpled. Dario was still standing. He holstered his gun. "Sal," he said, his voice tight, "clean this up." He walked over, his steps sure, and cut the ropes on the chair. The bag came off. It wasn't her father. It was a stranger, a man she had never seen. "What? Who?" "Leverage," Dario said, his voice tight with pain. "They never had him. They couldn't get into that facility. It's my facility. My men." She stared at him. You knew? You knew he was safe." "I've known for 3 days," he said, his hand pressed hard against his side. "I was waiting for them to make this move, for them to invite me." She looked at him, at the blood, at the dead men, at the stranger, who was now sobbing with relief. She'd been a pawn, a stupid, terrified pawn. She ran to him, her legs finally unlocking. He was leaning against a metal post, his face pale, his knuckles bloody. You let me think." "I let you learn," he panted. She collapsed against him, her hands on his chest, on his face. He was bloodied. He was shaking. Not from fear, from the adrenaline, the blood loss. She just held him, her face buried in his neck, her tears mixing with the dirt and grime. She was sobbing, a broken, hysterical sound. I thought if I gave them what they wanted," she whispered, her voice a raw confession against his skin. "I thought they would stop. I thought I could make it stop." He wrapped his good arm around her, his hand in her hair, holding her head, pulling her impossibly close. He was holding her up. He held her, his body a solid, warm, bleeding anchor in the chaos. His men were quietly, efficiently, cleaning up the war. "Shh," he murmured, his voice a low, rough rumble. "It's okay. You're safe." He held her face in his hands, forcing her to look at him. His eyes were dark, full of a pain and a promise that terrified her. "They will never stop, Savannah," he said, his voice a low, terrible vow. "They won't stop until I bury them all." Dario's vow, "They won't stop until I bury them all," was not a metaphor. It was a business plan. The aftermath of the warehouse was a blur of controlled, violent efficiency. Sal, his face a mask of grim stone, had bundled the bleeding Dario and the shell-shocked Savannah into the back of the Escalade. There was no hospital. There was only the penthouse, and Mike, the personal medic, waiting as if he had been summoned by some silent, psychic alarm. The bullet, it turned out, had been a through and through, a lucky shot, a few inches of flesh on his left side, tearing through muscle but missing bone and organ. It was a wound that would cripple a normal man for a week. For Dario, It was an inconvenience. It was also a turning point. That night, after Mike had stitched the wound with a practiced, detached skill, Savannah took over. The pretense of the guest room was gone, incinerated in the fire of the warehouse. She had run to her room, but only to grab her few possessions, and had deposited them, with a trembling, defiant finality, in his... She found him in the master bathroom, standing in the steam, his hand braced against the black marble wall as he stared at his own reflection. He was pale, the white of the bandage a stark contrast to his dark skin. "Let me," she said. It wasn't a question. She took the antiseptic wash and a clean, soft cloth. He said nothing. He just sat on the closed lid of the toilet, a position of such profound, un-Dario-like vulnerability, and let her. Her hands were shaking, but her touch was gentle. She cleaned the seeping blood from the edges of the dressing. He was watching her face, not his wound. He was watching the way her brow furrowed, the way she bit her lip. She wasn't looking at him with fear or with pity. She was looking at him with a fierce, terrifying focus. She was the girl from the diner, the one with the knife, all over again. When she finished, her hands rested on his bare shoulders. He covered her hands with his own. They stayed like that, in the steam and the silence, for a long time. The war had come home. That night, she didn't just move into his penthouse. She moved into his life. Dario on the offensive was a terrifying thing to behold. The man who had shown patience, who had watched from the counter of the diner, was gone. In his place was a cold, calculating general. The penthouse became a war room. Dario was no longer just a businessman. He was a hunter. He lived in his office, a space of glass and shadows, his voice a low, constant rumble on a dozen different secure lines. He was not just attacking the Valenza family, he was dismantling them, systematically, financially, structurally. He cut off their shipping lines. One by one, a port manager in New Jersey suddenly found himself under federal investigation for a clerical error. A trucking company in Queens had its entire fleet seized. Money that was supposed to be in a Cayman Islands account vanished. Dario didn't sleep. He'd come into the bedroom at 4 a.m, the sky just turning a bruised, pearly gray, and he would stand in the dark, just watching her breathe. She would wake, her senses attuned to him, and see his silhouette against the city. "Come to bed," she'd whisper. He would shed his clothes, his body tight with tension and exhaustion, and slide in beside her. He wouldn't sleep. He would just hold her. He would bury his face in her hair, his arms a steel cage around her, and he would hold her as if she were the only real, solid thing in his collapsing world. And then, an hour later, he would be gone, back to the coffee, back to the war. Their intimacy deepened in these long, uncertain nights. It was an intimacy forged in whispers, in shared breaths in the dark. He was becoming more ruthless to the world, but with her, he was becoming more raw, more open. He let her see the exhaustion. He let her see the strain. One night, he came home late, not just tired, he was off. He walked into the bedroom, his movements stiff. "What is it?" she said, sitting up. "Nothing." "Dario, what is it?" He was unbuttoning his shirt, and she saw him wince, a sharp, involuntary movement. She was out of the bed in an instant. She turned him to the light. His ribs were a map of purple and black, a deep, angry, horrific bruising. "What happened?" she whispered, her fingers tracing the edge of the swollen skin. He flinched. "A meeting," he said, his voice tight. "It did not go as planned. A difference of opinion." "A difference of opinion?" she said, her voice rising. This isn't a fist fight, Dario. They tried to kill you." "They didn't," he said, catching her hands. "I'm here." "Let me," she said, her voice small. She went and got the first aid kit, the one that was now a permanent fixture on the bathroom counter. She gently, so gently, cleaned a small cut she'd missed, her hands cool on his hot skin. He sat on the edge of the bed, his head bowed as she worked. He looked, for a moment, like a fallen soldier. "You're angry," he murmured. "I'm terrified," she whispered back, her voice thick. "I'm terrified one night you won't come home, that you'll just be a difference of opinion." He caught her hand, the one holding the antiseptic wipe, and pressed it to his lips. He kissed her knuckles. His eyes closed. "I will always come home to you," he vowed. That night, the wall between them, the last one, finally crumbled. He pulled her onto the bed, and there was no urgency. There was no fire, no collision like the first time. It was a different kind of passion. It was slow. It was vulnerable. He made love to her as if it were an act of worship. His hands, those hands that broke men, were impossibly gentle. They memorized her. His lips, which gave cold commands, whispered her name over and over, like a prayer. It was a quiet, desperate affirmation of life in the middle of a war. It was slow and deep and full of a love that was so painful, so profound, it made her ache. It was a promise, made with skin and breath and silence, that they were still here, that they were still themselves. Afterward, they lay tangled, the city lights a distant, cold sparkle. She was tracing the scar on his back, the long, thin, white line. "I've never felt this," she whispered into the dark. "Safe. Here. With you." He was quiet. He was just stroking her hair. "All my life," she said, the confession spilling out of her, a truth she hadn't even known she was holding. "All my life, I felt disposable. I was the girl at the diner, the one who could be replaced in an hour. I was just a function, a pair of hands to carry a plate, a body to fill a space. I was invisible. Even my father. I was his nurse, his caretaker, not his daughter, not really, just a part of the sickness." She took a ragged breath. "No one ever really saw me until you." He shifted, his body turning, and he was on his elbow, looming over her in the dark. His face was a mask of shadows, but his eyes were burning. He took her face in his hands, his palms rough, warm. "You are not disposable, Masa," he said, his voice a low, fierce growl. "You were never invisible. You were just hiding. And I," he said, his thumb brushing her cheek, "am the most selfish man in the world, because I'm glad they were all blind. I'm glad they didn't see, because they don't deserve to. You are not a function. You are everything." He leaned down and kissed her, a soft, slow, searing kiss. "I will spend the rest of my life," he whispered against her lips, "making sure you never feel that way again. You will never be invisible again." The war, however, was not over. The Valenzas were cornered, and a cornered animal is the most dangerous. Dario was winning, but the Valenzas had one last card to play. They couldn't get to her father. The facility was a fortress of Dario's men, as he had promised. So they targeted the facility itself. The call came at dawn. Savannah was woken by Dario sitting bolt upright in bed. The phone was to his ear. He said nothing. He just listened. But his face went white. "Dario, what is it, wa?" He hung up. He looked at her, and his eyes were full of a cold, black rage she had never seen. "Get dressed," he said, his voice flat. "Sal, they found something at the hospital." "Hospital? What? My father—" He's fine, Dario said, his voice tight, pulling on his own clothes. "They didn't get in. They tried to get near a package in a delivery truck at the main entrance. A bomb." She stopped breathing. They had tried to plant a bomb, not just for her father, for the whole building, for the other patients, the nurses, the families. "Sal's team found it on a sweep. They have a perimeter. They're defusing it, but Savannah, they would have..." just to, just to send a message, to hurt him. They would have killed dozens of innocent people just to hurt him, by hurting the father of the woman he loved. She slid to the floor, her legs gone. Dario was in front of her, on his knees. He's safe, Savannah. I swear to you, I wouldn't have let... It's handled. It's over. Why, it's not over, she screamed, and she hit his chest, her fist pounding against the solid, immovable wall of him. It's not over. It's never going to be over. This is my fault. My fault. No, this is my fault. This is my world. And you brought me into it, she cried, her voice breaking. And I brought my father into it. Oh, God, Dario. They... She couldn't say it. She was sobbing, hysterical. She wasn't just his anchor, she was his weakness. She was the one who was going to get everyone killed. Look at me, he commanded, his hands on her shoulders. I can't, she wept. I can't do this. I can't be this. I can't be your weakness, Dario. I can't be the reason that happens. My weakness? He almost laughed. The sound was a harsh, broken thing. Savannah, you think you're my weakness? He gripped her arms, his fingers digging in, not to hurt, but to hold, to make her see. Before you, he said, his voice a low, intense, shaking rumble. Before you, I had nothing. I had this. He waved at the penthouse. I had power, I had money, but I was just surviving. I was managing. I wasn't living. I was just waiting for a bullet, for a betrayal. I didn't care. I had nothing. Nothing to win for. He pulled her closer, his forehead pressing against hers. You are not my weakness, he whispered, his voice raw. You are the only reason I have to win. You are the only reason I want a life. You are the reason I am ending this, not just managing it. You are my strength, my reason. He pulled back. His eyes were burning into hers. I'm going to end this. I am going to bury them all, Savannah, and then I am going to build a life, a real one, a quiet one, whatever you want, a house, a gardenia bush. I don't care, but I will not, I cannot do it alone. He was still on his knees. She was sitting on the floor. It was the most unromantic proposal in the history of the world. He hadn't just bared his heart, he'd bared his whole desperate, violent soul. I'm asking you, he said, his voice thick, not for now, but for after, when the world is clean, when my hands are... He looked at his own hands, as if they were covered in blood. When this is done, will you let me fight for a life with you? A life with him, a life that wasn't this, a life after. She stared at him, her tears drying on her face. He was offering her peace, a peace he would have to go to war to get. She was quiet for a long time. The answer should have been simple. Yes. 1,000 times. Yes. But it wasn't. I can't, she whispered. His face fell. The boss, the hunter, the killer, and he just broke. His eyes hollowed. No, she said, grabbing his hands. No, not no. I can't answer that. I don't understand. Dario, I love you, she said, and the words were so simple, so true. I love the man who makes me breakfast. I love the man who holds me in the dark. I love the man who would burn the world down for me. But she took a deep breath. I don't know him. I am right here. I know this man, she said, touching his face. But I don't know. The why, I don't know how you became this. I've seen the penthouse. I've seen the blood. I've seen the war room. I have lived in the results, but I don't know the cause. She stood up, pulling him with her. If I'm going to say yes to a life with you, I have to know the man. All of him. Not just the part you let me see, not just the boss, not just the lover. I need the truth, your truth, unfiltered. I need to see where you came from. I need to know the monster. He stared at her. This was his last, most fortified wall, the one he never, ever let anyone near. His past. He just looked at her. His eyes a dark, unreadable void. He was at a crossroads. He could lie. He could deflect. He could tell her no. He nodded. Just once. A sharp, almost painful, jerking motion. "Get your coat," he said, his voice a hoarse whisper. He didn't take the Escalade. He didn't take Sal. He took her to the private garage, a place she had never been, past the rows of black armored vehicles to the very back. Under a dusty tarp was a car, an old 1990s, dark green sedan, dented, scratched. "What is this, Sinai?" she asked. "My first car," he said. "My father's." He drove. He drove them out of Manhattan, out of her part of Brooklyn, to a part of the city she had only ever seen from the highway. It was old. It was poor. It was the kind of neighborhood where the buildings looked tired and the people looked hard. He parked in front of a rundown 4-story brick apartment building. "This is it," he said. They walked up the stairs, the air smelling of old cooking oil and damp. He stopped at a door on the 3rd floor. The paint was peeling. He didn't have a key. He just pushed it. The lock was broken, the frame splintered. It had been like that for 20 years. The apartment was empty. Dust motes danced in the single beam of light from the one filthy window. This is your home?" she asked. "This is my beginning," he said, his voice hollow. He walked to the window, his back to her. He told her about his father, a good man, a dock worker, who was beaten to death in this very alley for refusing to look the other way for a Valenza shipment. He was 10 years old. He told her about his mother, who had faded. A ghost in her own apartment, who died of a broken heart 2 years later, which was a polite word for an overdose. He told her about being alone, about being 14 and hungry and full of a cold, black rage that had no bottom. He told her about Sal's father, the only man who had helped him, who had taken him in, who was one of his father's old crew. He told her about his first act, the act that had gotten him noticed. He had waited for 6 months, and he had removed the Valenza man who had given the order to kill his father. He was 16 years old. I didn't want to be a part of their world," he said, his voice a dead, flat monotone, staring out that dirty window. "So I built my own. I built a fortress. I built it on loyalty, on rules. My rules. We don't do certain things. We don't hurt civilians. We don't prey on people. We are a business, but to build it, I had to burn the old world down." He finally turned to her. His face was empty. He was stripped bare. The boss was gone. The lover was gone. There was just Dario, the 14-year-old boy in the empty room. This is the monster," he whispered. "This is the truth." He waited. She realized, terrified. He had just handed her a knife and shown her exactly where his heart was. She looked at him, at the man who had been born in this room of dust and pain, the man who had built an empire to keep himself safe, the man who had looked at her, a poor girl, and had seen everything. She didn't run. She didn't cry. She walked across the dusty floor, her footsteps the only sound. She walked right up to him, to this monster, to this boy. She didn't kiss him. She didn't hug him. She just reached up, her hand small, and slid it into his. He looked down at their joined hands. His was large, scarred, and trembling. Hers was small, steady, and warm. He looked up at her. His eyes were full. "I'm not leaving," she said. That was her answer. That was her yes. She stayed. The visit to the dusty, haunted apartment had changed everything. When they returned to the penthouse, the air was different. The war room was still a war room, but the man in it was no longer just a boss. He was Dario, the boy from the 3rd floor. He was preparing for one final assault. This was not about business. This was not about territory. This was about eradication. This was about ending the Valenza line, the family that had murdered his father and haunted his life, so that he could finally begin his own. He stood before her 2 nights after their visit, his face a mask of cold, hard resolve. He was dressed in his battle armor, a dark suit, no tie, his presence a suffocating weight of power. "You're leaving," he said. It was not a question. "I'm not," she replied, her voice just as firm. She was packing a small go-bag for him, something she had taken to doing, bottles of water, sterile bandages, protein bars. "You need someone here when you get back." "No," he said, and he took the bag from her hands, dropping it on the bed. He gripped her shoulders. His hands, for all their strength, were gentle. "Savannah, listen to me. This is the end. The last one. I am going to burn their house to the ground, and they know I'm coming. They are cornered. They are rabid. They will do anything to draw me out or to hurt me. That means they will come for you, not with threats, with guns." "I'm safe here," she said, her voice a plea. "This place is a fortress." "It's the first place they'll look," he said, his voice raw. I will not fight them and be worried about that door. I need you gone. I need you safe. I need to know with every part of my soul that when I am working, you are breathing, that you are untouched. It's the only way I can function." She saw it then. It wasn't a banishment. It was a strategy. It was his last, most vital piece of armor, her safety. "Where?" she whispered. "A cabin upstate. It's mine. It's quiet." "And guarded," she stated. "By 20 of my best men," and he said, without apology, "Sal is taking you now." The goodbye was not a passionate, cinematic kiss. It was a desperate, quiet pressing of bodies. He buried his face in her hair, his breath shuddering. "When it's done," he murmured, his voice thick, "I will come for you, and then we'll talk about gardens." She held him, her small hands fisted in the back of his expensive suit jacket. "You come back, Dario," she commanded, her voice a fierce, trembling thing. "You come back to me. That is an order." He pulled back, a rare, broken smile on his face. He kissed her, hard. A kiss of promise, of vows, of a life held in suspension. Then Sal was at the door, and she was gone. The cabin was beautiful, and it was a prison. It was set deep in a forest, overlooking a steel-gray lake. It was all cedar and glass, with a fireplace that roared to life at the touch of a button. And it was, as promised, surrounded. She saw them, dark-suited men moving through the trees like shadows. But it was quiet. For the first time in months, the only sound was the wind, the crackle of the fire. For 3 days, Savannah waited, and she reflected. She sat on a plush couch, a cashmere blanket over her legs, and stared at the lake. She was a world away from the Victory Diner, a lifetime away. She thought of the girl she had been, the girl with the sore feet, the girl whose world was 6 blocks wide, the girl who smelled of old grease and fear, a girl who was invisible, a girl who was disposable. She was not that girl anymore. She had faced down robbers. She had been threatened by a mob boss. She had been used as a pawn. She had seen a man's broken legs. She had stood in a room full of dead bodies. She had fallen in love with a killer. And she was still here. She was not his weakness. She was not just his reason. She was herself. She had survived, not just because he protected her, but because she was strong. She had a strength that was different from his. His was a strength of iron, of force. Hers was a strength of endurance. She was the one who could stand in the fire and not be consumed. She was the one who could look at his darkness, the dusty, empty apartment of his soul, and not run. She was the one who could hold his scarred, violent hand and call him home. She realized she was no longer the powerless girl from the diner. She was the woman who had brought a king to his knees, the woman who had given him a reason to win. And she was the woman he was coming home to. She was no longer afraid, she was just waiting. The fourth day, the silence was absolute. The ambush was not a trap for Dario. It was a trap he had set. He had leaked his own location, a false one, a warehouse in Red Hook, the very heart of the Valenza's old territory. He had fed the last remaining Valenza brother, Lorenzo, exactly what he wanted to hear, that Dario Moretti was arrogant, that he was coming alone to claim the territory. Lorenzo, a man of base, predictable rages, had taken the bait. He had pulled all of his remaining men, every last loyal soldier, to this one spot. He was going to end Dario Moretti in the same place his family had ruled for 50 years. Dario arrived, not in one escalade, but 10. They formed a silent, black perimeter. Sal was at his side. He's in all of them, just like you said. No one leaves, Dario said, his voice a flat, cold command as he checked the magazine on his handgun. This is not a business meeting. This is an extermination. The head, Lorenzo, he is mine. They moved, not as a mob, but as an army. They breached from 3 sides. The warehouse erupted. It was a brutal, deafening, chaotic war. Gunfire echoed, a terrible, percussive sound, off the high metal ceilings. Men yelled, they screamed. It was not a strategic, clean fight. It was a desperate, final, bloody brawl. Dario moved through it, not with rage, but with a cold, clear purpose. He was a surgeon, cutting through the disease. 2 shots, a man fell, a twist, a disarm, another one down. He was not a brawler. He was an artist of violence. He saw him, Lorenzo Valenza, across the floor, his face a mask of purple rage, firing blindly from behind a crate. Dario started to walk. He was in the open. The world seemed to slow down. The noise faded to a high-pitched whine. He could see Lorenzo's eyes, wide with shock, as he raised his gun. "Dario!" Sal yelled. Dario felt the impact first, a hot, shocking, giant's punch to his chest. It threw him back a step. He looked down. His suit was dark. He couldn't see the blood, but he felt it. He staggered. Lorenzo smiled, a triumphant, bloody grin. He stood up. Dario raised his own gun, and he was still standing. He was bleeding. He was fueled by a promise he'd made to a boy in a dusty room, to a woman in a penthouse. "This," Dario panted, the blood hot in his throat, "is for my father." He fired once. Lorenzo's smile vanished. He just crumpled. The war was over. Dario Moretti stood, his gun still raised, in a room of sudden, deafening silence. His men were standing, all of them. The Valenza family was gone. He looked down at his chest. The bullet. It had hit the vest, the high-end military-grade vest he had almost been too arrogant to wear. "Boss!" Sal was at his side, his face pale. "Vest!" Dario choked out. The air knocked from his lungs. The pain was still... It was... And then a new pain, a white-hot fire in his leg. He looked down. A Valenza man, one he'd thought was dead, was on the floor, his gun smoking, before Sal put 2 bullets in his head. Dario looked at his leg, at the dark, pumping, arterial blood. "Ah, yes," he said, and he collapsed. Savannah knew. She felt it. A cold, sharp, sudden stillness in the air. The phone on the coffee table rang. It was not Dario's private number. It was Sal. Her hand was perfectly steady as she picked it up. Sal. It's done. Sal's voice was rough. They're gone. All of them. Dario, she said. It wasn't a question. A beat of silence, the loudest silence of her life. He's alive, Sal said, his voice thick. But he's hurt. Bad. We're on our way to the private wing at St. Jude's. The one your father, Savannah, he's lost a lot of blood. I'll be there in 2 hours, she said. She hung up the phone. She walked to the door, past the startled guards. I'm leaving. Sal is on his way. My car. Now. They did not argue. She was not the hysterical girl in the hospital hallway. She was the boss's woman. She walked into the private wing of St. Jude's, her face calm, her eyes hard. The surgeon, the same one who had saved her father, met her. Miss Ruiz. How is he? He's a very, very lucky man, the surgeon said, his voice tired, and a very stubborn one. The bullet in his leg hit the femoral artery, a clean shot. If Mike hadn't been there, hadn't applied the tourniquet, he would have bled out in 3 minutes. We've repaired the artery. He's weak. He's stable. He's Dario, she finished for him. Where is he? He was in a private room. Wires, tubes, the steady rhythmic beep of the heart monitor. He was pale. So pale. His skin almost translucent against the white sheets. She sat. She did not cry. She just took his hand, his large, scarred, killer's hand. It was cold. She sat for 6 hours. She did not move. She just held his hand, rubbing her thumb over his knuckles, willing her strength, her endurance, into him. At 3 a.m, his fingers twitched. His eyes, groggy with morphine, flickered open. They were cloudy, unfocused. Then they found her. They cleared. Savannah, he rasped. I'm here, she whispered, her voice thick. You, he grimaced, the pain. You ran. I'm not running, she said. She leaned in, her lips to his ear, her hair a curtain around them. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. He looked at her, his eyes full of a desperate, hazy question. The question he had asked her. Will you let me fight for a life with you? She smiled, a small, tear-filled smile. She leaned in, and her answer was a whispered vow. I do. His eyes closed, a single tear of relief, of peace. Slid from the corner of his eye, his grip on her hand tightened, and he slept. Weeks later, they were married. There was no gala. There was no audience. There was no orchestra, no ice sculptures. There was a small stone chapel deep in the countryside, the same one his parents had been married in. It was just them. She wore a simple, cream-colored linen dress that skimmed her body. Her feet were bare. He wore a dark suit, his legs still stiff, a cane, which he hated, leaning against the pew. Sal was his best man. Mike, the medic, was the only other guest. The priest, a very old man who looked like he had seen everything and judged nothing, just smiled. They exchanged simple gold bands. Their vows were not spoken to the priest. They were spoken to each other. You are my strength, he said, his voice rough, his thumb caressing her hand. My reason. You are my home, she whispered, her eyes locked on his. At the reception, which was just the 4 of them in a private, dark wood-paneled room at a local, ancient restaurant, Dario stood. He raised his glass of water, the morphine still a necessary part of his life. He looked at her, and the entire room, the entire world, disappeared. To my wife, he said, his voice thick with an emotion she had never heard. To the woman who taught me that loyalty is love, and that love is the only power that matters. Savannah raised her own glass. She was shaking. To my husband, Mike, she said, her voice clear and strong. To the man who proved everyone wrong. They moved. The penthouse, the fortress in the sky, was sold. Dario, true to his word, had bought a quiet estate, far from the city, a long, winding, gated drive, yes, but it led to a house of stone and old wood, surrounded by trees. There was a garden. Life was not suddenly safe. He was still Dario Moretti. He still ran his empire. But the war was over. The violence was no longer a daily, breathing monster. It was a managed, distant thing. His focus had shifted from survival to living. And one night, late in the summer, she found him. She came down, unable to sleep. She found him in the vast, open kitchen, the moonlight streaming in. He was leaning on his cane, staring out at the dark, silent garden. "Dario?" she whispered. He turned. A slow smile spread across his face. He held out his hand. "Dance with me," he said. "There's no music," she laughed. "There is," he said. She came to him, barefoot, in one of his old t-shirts. He tossed the cane. It clattered to the floor. "You're not—" "I'm fine," he said. He pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her, his body still strong, still solid. He was her anchor. They swayed, barefoot, in the moonlight in their kitchen. A slow, silent, 3-beat rhythm, her head on his chest, his heart beating a steady, strong, calm rhythm beneath her ear. "It's perfect," she whispered. "Not yet," he murmured. He was looking over her head. She turned. In a large, comfortable armchair by the unlit fireplace, her father was sitting, a blanket over his knees. He was not asleep. He was watching them. He had been moved to the estate, to a private wing, with a full-time nurse, a month ago. He was watching them, and he was smiling. His eyes, once dull with sickness and despair, were clear. He was, finally, at peace. Dario dipped her, a low, smooth, playful movement, and she laughed, a real, free, joyful sound. It echoed in the quiet, in the safety of the house they had built. He pulled her back up, and he kissed her. And in the moonlight, surrounded by the 2 men she loved, Savannah Ruiz, the girl from the diner, the woman who had proven them all wrong, was finally, completely, home. Thank you so much for listening to this story. We truly hope you enjoyed the journey of Savannah and Dario. We love hearing from you. So please, leave a comment below and let us know where in the world you are listening from. If you love stories like this, be sure to subscribe to Mafia Romance Stories for new releases. And finally, let us know your thoughts in English. What was your favorite part of their story?